Broadcasting live on AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. In the evenings on WCPT 820 Chicago's Progressive Talk, and in the nighttime hours in Seattle, 1150 AM KKNW. It is the Matt McNeil Show on your Monday. Good to have you with us. We're starting the week off right. John Fugelsang is kind enough to join us. Tell Me Everything is his great show that's on SiriusXM. Starts at 8 p.m. Central Time. You can catch it there and podcastable everywhere. But we've had John on many years, and I know he's been working on a book, and it has come on out, and I can now say New York Times best-selling author John Fugelsang, Separation of Church and Hate, a sane person's guide to taking back the Bible from fundamentalists, fascists, and flock-fleecing frauds, by John Fugelsang, is out now, available in your favorite book retailer, and John is kind enough to join us to talk about that today. Hey, John.
Well, Matt McNeil, I knew that you would not be afraid to say the second half of that book's title. Thank you very much. A lot of so-called journalists are just doing the catchy first part, not the alliterative second part. And you took it on, Mr. McNeil. Thank you for that.
Well, no, thank you. I've often said to you, I mean, I've been in radio for a long time, but I've always shied away, and it was you talking to you and hearing your insanely sane points about the fact that Christianity is not supposed to be this MAGA world thing that's been creative and fighting back. I mean, that's really what got me to the point where I could actually comfortably start talking about religion myself. And that's because you have been the guy taking the lead, leading the charge in this fight to.
Oh, not me. I'm just an entertainer. I'm just a clown. There's real clergy and real activists who do this stuff. I just tell jokes about it. That's it with me. I just have a platform because I tell jokes, but you're very kind. But I mean, I'm inspired by so many people like you yourself, Matt. I mean, great broadcasters who actually aren't afraid to talk about what the Bible really says versus what these people who control our government want us to believe the Bible says. And I wrote this book because I was really sick of this movement that does not fight for any teachings of Jesus, but uses his name for the one thing they do fight for, and that is conservative Christian power. That is their religion. That is what they care about. They don't care about abortion. They don't care about immigration. They don't care about gun violence. They care about whatever they have to care about to get them more power. That is their religion. And they are opposed to the gospel teachings of Jesus in policy and deed. So, I mean, I wrote this for any atheist or any believer of any faith who's ever going to have to deal with these people, because we've learned that the Democrats aren't really going to take them on scripture and call out these pious frauds. And we know the corporate media is going to be too terrified to do it. I mean, you, Mr. McNeil, are very brave. You're not afraid to talk what is actually in the Bible versus what MAGA pretends is in the Bible.
Yes.
So I wrote it for everybody who was raised in a Christianity that was about love and service and empathy and caring for others, and has grown up to wonder what happened to that movement of peace, and why is it all these mean people beating up on migrants and trans kids?
Yeah. You've been on this show, I think it was like 3 years ago. You said you were starting to work on this book. How long exactly has this book been kicking around in your noggin and you started working on it?
I mean, I first submitted my first book proposal for this book 15 years ago.
Wow.
When my dad was in hospice, and it was a very different America back then. Back then, I was much more enraged by Christian America's fervor for war in Iraq. And that's what originally spawned me to want to write the book. That and the homophobia, which has always been one of the things that obsessed me the most. And then over the years, it was a project that I'd be in between doing TV or radio jobs, and I'd have a pocket of free time, and, a lit agent would say, hey, submit something. And I would try it again. Over the years, I submitted book proposals, I think 4 different years. And then finally, I went in for a meeting with Simon & Schuster, and I sold it on a pitch, just verbally. After all the years of book proposals, being in the room and talking it out, for years I was told, Matt, for years I was told, wait, it's a book for believers and atheists about how to use the Bible to debate right-wing Christians? Who is that for? For my first one, I had a publisher at a very big house say to me, I don't know any of these conservative Christians in my life. I don't have people like this in my life. I don't relate to this. And then we finally launched, and the week we launched, all of our TV cable news appearances canceled. And so we got to the New York Times bestseller list for 2 weeks in a row, and the top 10 on Amazon, just by radio, podcast, independent progressive media. And I've spent years saying Democrats have to go onto stations like this and podcasts and SiriusXM Progress more. And to sell this book, I thought, well, I better put my money where my mouth is and go to all the podcasts. Every racist with a podcast in his basement, of his mom's basement, J.D. Vance was there last year. I would say, Democrats, why do I always see you in the green rooms at CNN, but never on these rinky-dink podcasts? And so I did so many, Matt. And honestly, I mean, there's a lot of people out there. I think that the majority of us were raised religious, and a lot of us consider ourselves spiritual now because we're so turned off to all this hypocrisy. But there's a lot of us out there, and a lot of people who might be atheists, might still believers, but they don't have a problem with Jesus or God. They have a problem with these mean Christians and how they don't treat each other the way we're supposed to.
And the fact that it is a New York Times bestseller and it is having success. I mean, this is one of the things I really like about this, is that you're only seeing what is out there, and the system is designed to try to say, oh, no, we don't want to do this. But now you're kind of once again proving, no, there is a large market and a majority of people in this country who are tired of a religion based on love, compassion, caring, and welcoming being used as a weapon of hate constantly.
Yeah.
Still today. And it is hard for me to fathom that a book like this would be so hard to put out there, but yet here you are. And once again, you prove the naysayers wrong by having just a New York Times bestseller.
Well, let me point out that within 24 hours of my book, which is about how to take down Christian nationalism with nonviolence and scripture and humor, another faceless coward took down a real life Christian nationalist with a bullet. And so, literally within 24 hours of my book being released, Mr. Kirk was murdered so brutally and cruelly by someone who was worse than anything Mr. Kirk ever could have done in his life. And so I understand why media would shy away from a book like this right now. But that's why it's all the more remarkable. The Daily Show had us on, but that was our second week on the New York Times list, and God bless them. But it was really just that there are so many folks out there who are cued into progressive media and shows like this. And that shows that even if they don't acknowledge that there are these people who were raised religious and now kind of feel uneasy about where the church is going in this country, I think that's a huge force and a huge voting bloc.
John Fugelsang, kind enough to join us. Over the years, one of the things that's been most disappointing for me is to watch the church leaders get into bed with this. And that is something that you can't deny, is that some of these church leaders are out there saying, hey, if the Republicans are willing to give me a seat at the table, all I have to do is basically whittle down this religion into two things, anti-abortion and hating gay people, and I'm good. And I mean, that's one of the parts which is really hard, and fighting back against the system itself is somewhat intimidating for sure.
Well, sure, but Jesus stood up to conservative power and authority time and time again. Our modern day right-wing Christians have made the mistake of aligning themselves with authoritarian power instead of standing up to it in the name of justice and mercy. There's no teachings of Jesus that the MAGA movement fights for. None. Yeah. Jesus lays it out in Matthew 25, the judgment of nations. He will judge individuals and nations on 4 basic criteria. I was naked and you clothed me. I was thirsty. You gave me something to drink. When didn't we do it for you, Lord? When you didn't do it for the least, you didn't do it for me. The 4 basic criteria Jesus gives there. Heaven or hell, individuals or nations. Take care of the poor, take care of the sick, welcome the stranger, and be kind to those in prison. Nothing about screaming at women outside clinics. Nothing about persecuting the trans kid who wants to play sports. Nothing about believing in a talking snake or hating Muslims. Those are the 4 criteria Jesus gives for whether you're a Christian nation or not. And I think it's not too much of a mystery why our conservative friends never try to put any Jesus quotes on a classroom wall or a courthouse wall. Yeah. They worship him, but they don't follow him. And if they're going to try to push a narrow Jesus-free version of this religion into every level of our public and secular life, we're allowed to call them out for the fraud because they use this Jesus as a mascot and prop. They don't follow him, and they legislate against his teachings. Democrats can't call them out. You know why. Media can't call them out. You know why. It's going to be up to the rest of us to remind the world that hate is not a family value and hate is not a Christian value.
I had you on last time, and I had a listener want me to ask you this question because specifically about Christianity, and you brought up the Gospels, specifically the Gospel of Matthew, which tells you, take care of people for goodness sakes. That's a direct teaching from Jesus.
Yeah.
And there's this new movement within a lot of the conservative Christian elements to say, okay, the Gospels are nice and all, they're good stories, but it's Romans you should pay attention to. And she asked, if I get the chance to ask you this, what is your response when a conservative comes up and says, the Gospel's not that important. Romans is really where you need to focus your attention.
Did she say why?
Why they basically were? I think it's because they basically exactly kind of what you're pointing at, which is Republicans don't like the Gospels because
they don't like Jesus.
They don't like. They only go.
They need an anything but Jesus Bible. That's what they need. They got to either go back to the Hebrew Scriptures for some, Old Testament angry stepgod, some wrath. Yeah, Leviticus, which none of them follow, but they'll use it. They'll weaponize parts of Leviticus, a chapter they don't follow and don't live by and don't believe in. They'll use that to persecute a gay minority that Jesus commands them to love. I mean, the late Mr. Kirk called Leviticus God's perfect law, which to me means he must have been keeping kosher if he lives by Leviticus. And I really am sad he must have missed out on a lot of bacon. But the fact is that to say that Leviticus is God's perfect law is to deny Jesus' second coming. To deny Jesus brought a new covenant. But we're all Orthodox Jews when they want to be homophobes. But Leviticus also says you have to welcome the stranger. So, oops, Leviticus also commands you to stone adulterers to death. But I'll let you guys work that out with Mr. Trump on your own. They don't follow the books, Matt. And so Romans is Paul's letter. Romans is the most commonly cited piece of New Testament scripture they use to justify anti-gay discrimination. I'm guessing that's why she asked about it. And in Paul's letter to Romans, he talks about these detestable things, and he's talking about these Romans who worship these gods, these animal gods, this idolatry, and they rejected the one true God of the Hebrews, and so God gave them over unto these disgusting lusts, and men burned in passion with each other. The women too did turn from their natural use to do things that are unnatural and detestable. It doesn't really say what the women did. It's implied they're lesbians. It's the closest the Bible ever gets to condemning lesbians, but it never actually says women with women. And yet it hasn't stopped thousands of years of people condemning lesbians for that. So what does this story tell us? Well, this is Paul, and Paul's not giving a pronouncement towards gay people at all. Paul is saying that once upon a time, God really didn't like these Romans who were partying, and God gave them up to unnatural affections, meaning I think that means forced by, Matt, in the personals.
Can you stick around for a few minutes?
Yeah, you asked. I'm sorry, man. You asked.
All right, John Fugelsang, listen, take a break. It's the Matt McNeil Show. Don't you know that we can do the math and work it out? It is the Matt McNeil Show. John Fugelsang, kind enough to join us. Separation of Church and Hate, a sane person's guide to taking back the Bible from fundamentalists, fascists, and flock-fleecing frauds. He's kind enough to join us to talk about his New York Times best-selling book. And it was great listening to you talk about.
Aren't you glad you wanted to go down the Romans rabbit hole, Mr. McNeil? Aren't you glad you subjected your listeners to that? At the end of this day, it's just Paul had an uptight hang-up about some old Roman guys who hooked up with each other. It's not Jesus saying being gay is bad. People who don't like Jesus's commands to love easily go to Paul's commands to hate. But, Romans is also where Paul commands you to welcome the immigrant and treat them as one of your own. Sorry, homophobes. You don't really believe in Paul either.
Well, and yeah, it is the picking and choosing of it. And I'm one of these people that, like I said, I grew up with the religion that was, hey, everyone's welcome. Come on in, have fun. Let's have a hot dish special down in the basement of the church. And, it wasn't about, talking about who you need to hate. No. And the fact that some churches, that's what it's been boiled down to, is really disturbing.
If your church isn't telling you to love your enemy, but instead is telling you who your enemies are, you're not really in a church. Jesus's whole movement was about humility and sacrifice and service leadership and putting the marginalized classes first. He was not about total right-wing domination of society and culture. That is the trap that our MAGA loved ones have fallen into. They think that forcing Christianity else on other people is being a good Christian. You can ask some slaves and Indians about that someday. Being saved didn't save them. But this goes back to manifest destiny. This goes back the entire history of Christianity to the Crusades. it's always been these authoritarian Christians who believe it's okay to ignore everything Jesus commands us to do if we're forcing Christianity on someone else. Then violence is okay. And so you got, the Crusades are slaughtering Jews and Muslims. St. Francis renounces violence and preaches peace. You've got the doctrine of discovery, and Columbus is murdering all these people in Hispaniola. And it's the Catholic priest on his boat, Bartolomeo de las Casas, who protests the treatment of indigenous people back to the Queen. You've got the American slavery propped up by Christianity, but it's the Christ followers like Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass and the Quakers who push back. You got Christianity propping up the Holocaust and Christian martyrs like Dietrich Bonhoeffer giving their life for Jews. You've got segregation propped up by good Christian folk, and you got Dr. King fighting back. The entire history of inspiring Christian activism, and there's an incredible history of Christian activism, and it's always in response to Christian authoritarianism. Christian authoritarianism is always the bad guy, but it's always taken the actual Jesus followers and their non-Christian allies, people of other religions, atheists and agnostics, to beat back the crazy toxic Christians.
And you do that. I mean, I have listened to your show. I've seen you in action. The number of times that people will come after you on social media and such, where they're so convinced, no, John, you don't have it right, which I'm just gonna, don't do that. There are quicker ways to die.
Okay.
But,
no, I like them all. No, I like those guys. They give me material. Where does Jesus come out against the death penalty? It's like, really? Okay. You start with Sermon on the Mount. He cancels out, he deletes eye for an eye, brother, and they haven't read it, Matt. They and by the way, they fight for it. Okay, they're too busy fighting for Jesus. They don't have time to read his words, listen to him. They're too busy fighting for the man. They're fighting for themselves. They're fighting for their own dominance. It's the opposite of what Jesus said.
And it is such a, especially you bring up the war against the transgender community. It's just Jesus himself would be in the transgender community, stopping these people from coming after them. That's a fact. That is just a fact. We're supposed to be better like Jesus, not devolve and take Jesus down with us.
It's a suicide rate that's 9 times the national average. It's almost like they could use a religion based on love and acceptance and forgiveness to come to their rescue. I mean, if you're a Christian, if you're a Christ follower, why aren't you volunteering to help with the homeless trans kids in your neighborhood then? Why aren't you trying to get the suicide rates down? I mean, not to get all conclave and churchy, but I mean, there's nothing in the Bible that allows you to be cruel to trans people. And there's nothing Christ-like about discrimination against them. Just like there's nothing un-Christ-like by supporting gender ideology. I mean, there's nothing in the Bible against it. There's that famous story where they see the blind man, and the apostles ask Jesus, well, what did his parents do? What sin did his parents do to make him like this? Or was it him? And Jesus is like, there's no sin here. So sometimes people are born differently, so God's glory can be revealed in a different way. That's literally, without giving too much away, the plot of Conclave. And who the hell are these bigots who vote for Donald Trump and think that somehow Donald Trump has anything in common with Jesus beyond spending time with hookers and using ghostwriters? Who the hell are these MAGA people to say that transgender people are somehow an affront to God, that it's not their job to love them? I mean, test after test after test for these right-wing folks. I really thought the shooting of Mr. Kirk might make some of them think we should do more to make it harder. Harder to pop off and kill somebody. I mean, if that shooter's grandfather's gun, if they'd had a law that gun had to be secured, maybe that wouldn't have happened. And that certainly would have prevented the Sandy Hook shooting as well. I really thought, Matt, these pro-life people would take stewardship more seriously. But American right-wing Christianity is this cult that values personal freedoms and liberties above American lives.
It's a story in the Star Tribune today about the fact that we have red flag laws in the state, which are run by the county, and then the counties which have done those and imposed them, they definitely have stopped, potential shootings, while other counties are just not doing it, and even having a case where they gave the gun back and the guy threatened his ex with the gun. I mean, it is really, we can do these things. Jesus told us to do these things, and once again, it's what you have to do. Are you thinking about doing a tour with us? I know a lot of people would love to see you come across the country again.
Yeah, we are going to do a tour. We've only got a couple of dates so far. We're going to be in Chicago at Zanies next Wednesday, the 8th. It's going to be the first ever book tour in comedy clubs. It's an unholy experiment. We're trying it out. And then I'll be playing in DC on the 12th of November, and many more dates to come very near you.
So Chicago, okay, once again, on the 8th of October, Zanies, John Fugelsang, get tickets, go get this, and then go get the book. Once again, this is something you're going to want to have, because this is, not only is it a good read, but it's also, it's going to give you a better argument against the insanity that is out there right now.
Thank you, Mr. McNeil. Thank
Separation of Church and Hate, a sane person's guide to taking back the Bible from fundamentalist, fascist, and flock-fleecing frauds. And that is not an easy thing to say, even for a radio broadcaster.
You have my respect, sir.
John Fugelsang, and I also, your show is on weeknights at 8 o'clock Central Time, correct?
Yes, 8 o'clock Central for 3 hours every night. And then if you don't have SiriusXM, we're also a free podcast available the next day.
Find your podcast, John Fugelsang there. And of course, just get the book. Get the book. You want this book. Thank you, John. John Fugelsang, I appreciate the time as always. And it is an absolute, I consider you a blessing. I really do. I think you're wonderful what you're doing right now.
Matt, you have terrible taste in men, but thank you. And thanks to your wonderful, deeply attractive audience as well.
John Fugelsang, thank you very much. I appreciate the time.